Okay.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. It is March the 20th, 2020.
Wow.
An unusual time in life right now, right?
Yeah.
Coronavirus is getting kicked off in high gear. So this is the second week, I believe, that church and Sabbath schools will not be meeting tomorrow as planned. And so we are kind of making a concerted effort to record a message for Sabbath School. We're going to have a 4-person discussion group today to kind of go through a thought in the Bible, because I think it's something we still shouldn't let go of what we look to do every week, right?
Right.
So that's kind of our hope. So I'm over here at the Keller's house. I've got, of course, Herb and Melissa, and Lauren has been so gracious to join us as well. So that way we can get a wide variety of perspectives as we discuss the topic today. I'm going to ask Herb to start us with prayer, and then we'll kind of get dug right in.
Yes, let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we invite you here this evening as the Sabbath begins, that you continue to bring perspective to our hearts and our minds as we are in a very unique place in the world today. We ask you to be with so many families out there that are afraid and scared and are dealing with different things, and allow them, Lord, to allow you to lead and to guide through these troubled times. And hopefully so many will come closer together to you through these conversations. We ask you to be with us tonight as we prepare a word and conversation for our Sabbath School class. And we ask you to guide each family that is going to join into this video, that their hearts are filled with your love. In the Lord's name we pray, amen.
Amen. So I would say, as you all watch this, if there's thoughts or questions that you want to post, we're going to put this on our Facebook webpage. So if you are watching this and want to add a thought or a question, Herb and I and Melissa will be monitoring it. We'll be happy to engage in discussion. Since we won't be able to do it live, we're pre-recording. Next week we may try a Google Hangout where we could join live on Sabbath morning. But anyway, we'd encourage that. So in light of what's going on in our society right now, so today, Illinois went on effective lockdown, right? What's the phrase that they want to use? Shelter in place.
Shelter in place.
Yeah, we're learning lots of phrases that we've never really thought about before, right? Shelter in place, social distancing, flattening the curve, right? All of these phrases that none of us knew 2 weeks ago. So we're here. Sheltering in place has been enacted, I think, in New York, California, and Illinois.
And we have curfew now.
Curfew, right? They announced a curfew for us in Florida, 11 p.m. till, was it 5
a.m.?
5 a.m. And I think we're probably expecting, I think shelter in place is probably just a matter of days here in Florida as well. And so Lauren, of course, is stuck at home. All schools are going online. I've been preparing with all the other teachers this week to get online classes ready to go. It's going to be a whole new world. But hey, we're going to be resilient and roll with it and make do. Make lemonade out of lemons, right? All right. In light of that, with all the fear that's going around and the panic that is very obviously evident in the world and especially in the United States, we thought we'd deviate from the lesson and we go into the book of Luke. It's a great section. It's in Luke chapter 12. And we're going to start in verse 13 and then kind of get through verse 40. So it's Luke 12, starting verse 13 through verse 40. I'm using a Bible called the Serendipity Bible to help generate discussion. I think it's worked really well for me in the past, and so I'm going to kind of utilize that as we go into 3 different sections. So this first section is verses 13 through 21. It's the parable of the rich fool that probably many of you are familiar with. So here's a question to start off. What did you like to collect as a child? You are sort of a child, Lauren. Are there things that you like to collect?
I used to like to collect rocks.
Like polished rocks?
No, like ugly rocks.
Like
the find in your backyard rocks. Like, I don't know, very weird rocks.
When you went trips, would you bring
Yeah,
rocks
I would
home?
bring rocks home.
Do you still have these rocks?
I have a few in places, and I'm like, why are these here? Yeah.
So you once upon a
Flat
time...
ones, rough
Shells.
ones,
There's
sparkly.
shells throughout the back of the boat too.
Yeah, there are shells too. I used to love to collect shells.
The great news about that collection is it costs you very little, right? So that's kind of cool.
Yes. Pigs.
Pigs.
Any kind of pig, like a stuffed one or a rock one or pictures of pigs. I don't know what it was. I loved pigs. I have an Adventist. I shouldn't like pigs.
Well, you could have collected them live and saved them from the slaughterhouse, as every good Adventist could do, right?
I could have.
That's funny. So did you like, there's a game that Brian and his family love to play, is it Pass the Pig, I think is what it's
Oh,
called?
I've never played that.
You've never played it?
I've never played it.
Oh,
Never played it. I
you'll
do
have
have
to-
it. Do I have it?
We used to, yeah.
Oh, Brian
With the
and his family,
hamburger one?
they love this. And it's two pigs. You roll these two pigs and how they land. I don't know what, I've never played it. I know they love it. Pass the Pig. So you collected pigs. All right.
Pigs.
Herb?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, so it was actually Petoskey stones. It's a special,
Petoskey.
yeah, it had a very interesting design on it, and a lot of them were in Michigan. You could find it's the state rock.
The Petoskey stone.
That's what it's called.
I'm going to have to Google that later. I've never even heard of those before. The Petoskey
I had a lot of
stones.
those. They were beautiful.
My childhood collections were a little bit odder, I think. Well, pigs are kind of odd, but no, I collected cigarette packs,
Oh.
empty ones. I didn't smoke them or anything. I just had the variety of cigarette packs. I thought they were all kind of cool, and I collected bottle caps.
Okay. Yes.
And then I collected. I'm kind of a collector. My wife would probably call me a hoarder. Actually, I collected comic books as well, and I actually still have them stuffed in my closet.
They might be worth
Symbols,
something.
Yeah, my wife wants to sell. You need to sell those. I'm like, no, that's the point. You collect those not to sell them. You collect them because they mean something to you. And then now, as an adult, it's just gonna fit right in. I collect antique cigarette lighters.
Oh, of course you do.
Of course I do. I've never smoked in my life. I've collected cigarette packs and I collect antique cigarette lighters. But some very interesting ones. One looks like
Those are really
a one-armed bandit and a piano and a wide variety of things. They're actually pretty cool. I have a whole curio cabinet at home with them. So how I started that, it's my mom that got me started on that one. So
Never seen that in your house.
you'll have
Never seen it.
Right, and, yeah, that's true. Thanks, Lauren. Yes, and as my students know, I also now collect unicorns. That's a story for a different day. We'll just say it comes off of the Squatty Potty commercial. That's all I'll say about that. Anyway, all right, so things we've collected. Okay, so starting here in verse 13, it says, someone in the crowd where Jesus was at said to Jesus, and by the way, I might editorialize this a little bit to keep it more modern in what we're going through with life. It says, teacher, please tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus replied, man, who appointed me your judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said to the crowd, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then he told this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a really good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all of my toilet paper and hand sanitizer and eggs and ground meat. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't say that. I'm sorry. I will store all of my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich toward God. So what are your thoughts as we hit that first section?
You know, go ahead, Melissa.
I just think I think a lot about, especially right now. You know, you see the videos of the lady trying to yank that toilet paper out of that elderly lady's cart, and you think about how selfish you can be. I mean, the guy's like, I've been blessed with all this crop. It's for me. And I don't know that we've thought about why we are blessed with the things that we've been given.
Yeah, I mean, it implies he already had a barn built
Yeah.
that must have been already full with goods.
Yes.
And so,
And he has overflowing.
yeah, he has overflowing, so now he needs to build a bigger barn.
Does he know what his neighbors need? That's what I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting lesson. There's a question here that's interesting. It says, if you kind of put this in modern times, what would the obituary say about this man the day after he died? If it was writing up the obituary about this man in earthly terms, what would it say?
I guess his brother got what he wanted.
Well, I don't think this is the same man. I
Oh,
think
okay.
as the brother. What I'm thinking where it's going with that is, I think the papers would say would laud his efforts. He died a very wealthy man. You know, he full of abundance. He lived a good life. He was very successful.
Yeah,
Okay.
he had everything he needed, type of comment.
Right.
Like you said, he was wealthy, and I know this is going off of a little bit off topic of your obituary component, but you know, the interesting thing in here is it talks very clearly that not just that he had a barn that was full, but he had enough for years, but yet he still felt like he needed more. And there are statements out there that, you know, the rich always want more. And, you know, why is that? I mean, what is the fear that we have when you have something that you feel like you have to work harder, you have to do more in order to keep what you have? I mean, what are we truly afraid to give up?
Yeah. But what do you think Jesus' main point of this parable is?
I think that his main point in this parable is kind of like don't be so selfless that you have nothing. Like, he understands like keeping stuff for yourself isn't bad, but I think being generous and looking at there are a bunch of other people who may not be as blessed to say this rich man was, is not a bad thing to like give up something, because he obviously has abundance of grain and like goods. So I mean, what would happen if you gave up a little every single?
Yeah.
The last line, it says a lot to me. It says, give up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. So here I am, I'm so happy to have this nice house and this big bunch of stuff, but I don't even think about what God has given. Or I don't shout it from the mountaintop to say, here, God's given me good stuff, you take it, because I don't need it, I have enough.
Well, and what's interesting is, and obviously we don't know, and we're not a part of the story, but what this guy was intentional about was that because he ran out of space to build a newer, bigger barn, and it didn't say anything about that he goes, well, you know, there's nothing wrong with building a new barn, but the problem is it never said in here once that he tried to help anybody else. This was completely about self. This was completely about, well, I ran out of space, and he was extremely deliberate about building a new, bigger barn. And that's very singular focused on himself.
Well, at the end of the parable, what good did it do him?
Nothing.
Right? He died with a barn full of stuff that doesn't go wherever he's going.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Right? It gets passed on to somebody else. I don't know, it's a fine balance, because a lot of us as parents and families and professionals, you know, I think most of us, I'm gonna, assume, plan and prepare for the future, right? Life insurance and 401k, which we don't want to talk about a 401ks right now.
Don't go look at that.
As we've avoided that
Talk about
altogether.
keeping yourself flat.
Yeah, as the Dow has been battered to death, right? But I don't think that this parable is saying that we shouldn't prepare for lean and full times. In fact, that was what Joseph was called to do with his life, right? Is to store. But I think it's an understanding of how much does one really need, and having your focus out there with being ready to help others that don't have.
Well, I think that's a discussion, Herb and I. If you get to this point and you've been in this house, how old are you?
17.
We've been in this house almost 18 years before she was born. And so we're like a minute away from paying off this house. And it's really easy to think, where do I want to go next once it's paid off? But really and truly, the blessing of being able to have this paid off and be able to use that for others' needs or other things that God's calling on our heart to do is something that we've talked about, that we have set aside. So
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a bit of a feel going on right now in society. I mean, there's like the video you saw, the woman fighting over toilet paper, but I think there's more and more. I get the sense from people now, as life has become pared down to what's the basic necessities. when you're interacting with people, for the most part, they're like, okay, be healthy, stay safe. Is there anything I can do for you? I'm finding in my interactions, as brief as they have been this week, as I've socially isolated, but in the few that I've had, I went shopping, did some things today. People, I think, are generally more they seem like there's more friendly, there's more willingness there to help in general. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions, and I think if nothing else comes out of this, I think that's a pretty good life lesson that this is talking about, is having our hearts not set on possessions, because all of those things, our ESPN, our sports teams, our Disney trips, our vacations, can all be taken away. And think how I would never, how rapidly it all goes away.
Immediate.
But then it's like,
so immediate.
but what's most important?
So Dave, everything you just said, this is the New Living Translation. The verse 21 says, yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God.
That's beautiful.
I thought that was a nice way of saying, I mean, and I think everything we've just said here kind of leads to that. Is we've talked about personal gain, personal want to have more, and all this is saying is all the Lord wants to do is just to have you sit down and talk with Him.
Yeah, they have that rich relationship.
Have that relationship.
I like that. I will say, as an aside, if any of you are listening to this, if you do have a specific need or issue, please reach out to one of us. If we can help take care of it, we certainly will, but we also have connections to resources that may also be available to you. So I'd encourage you all to do that. We'll be more than happy to help. So good. All right, let's go on to the next section. I like this opening question. This is starting in verse 22 now. It says, which situation is most worrisome to you? It gives a few options. Overdrawn at the bank, gained 10 pounds, child expelled, nobody called all weekend, mother-in-law stays for 2 weeks, or business issues. Careful, Herb, you're being recorded.
Mine stayed for years.
And his has been here since December. Just kidding.
Guess I'm past that one.
Lauren, how about you? Which of those things stresses you out? I think I'm going to guess.
That I can relate to, and that's like gaining 10 pounds, because like I don't have a mother-in-law or anything, so I don't know. It doesn't even worry me that much if I gain 10 pounds, but
That's what skinny people say.
Or 17-year-olds.
Yeah, I gained 10 pounds when I smell something really good at the restaurant.
yeah. So that's probably the only thing that I'd be
You could relate
worried
to,
about.
sure.
Yeah.
If you accidentally gain 10 pounds for whatever reason,
Yeah.
your basketball coach might want to run it off of you sometime in the future.
I mean, it might be muscles. So.
No, that's true. That's true.
Oh my.
So, but that's the only one I can really think would worry me.
I'm trying to think. I've overdrawn at the bank, not lately, but I've done that on more than one occasion. Yvonne will be happy to confirm. Business folding is probably what was stressing me out the most.
If your business folded. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience back in 96 or 97, I think, when Medicare shifted its payment source, and many of us therapists thought we were going to lose our jobs.
Wow.
It was terrifying. It didn't
Yeah.
happen, but it was terrifying.
So out of all those for me, now I never owned my own business, but our family did growing up. We were on a dairy farm, so it's a personal business. I can remember, because dairy farming wasn't an area of the world that you could make, for say, good money, and obviously you're always subject to what's going on. I mean, does it rain well that summer type
Right.
of scenario? It was a dairy farm. I remember knowing and hearing conversations my parents were having, as much as they tried to shield me from what was going on. And I remember as a child making purposeful decisions not to do certain things that would cost the family money, and worrying about that. Not that probably I could really do anything about it, but in my mind I was. And I was like, do you want to go to ice cream tonight? No, I'm fine. We don't need to go get ice cream, So as a teenager, being very concerned about, I was never worried about where my next meal came from. I was more worried about, was our family going to be okay? Would we be able to take care of the things we needed to?
Yeah.
So.
And Yvonne grew up with that same stress in her life. She grew up in a very poor situation, and I don't think she ever would like, where's my next meal coming from? But meals were very consistently rice and beans, and tortillas, very cheap meals to get by.
Potatoes for us.
Yeah, and so it's led her to, she's very conscientious nowadays of where the money's at and are we doing okay, and it's one of those inherent fears that you've experienced as a child as well. So yeah, understand. All right, Lauren, would you be so kind? Do you mind reading?
Sure.
It's starting in verse 22, Lauren, down through verse 34.
Okay. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom, no barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than the birds? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the lilies grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of them. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, like little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide pursuits for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be."
Very good. Thank you, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this section relate to the one we just did? How are they tied or linked together, would you say?
I think it's focusing on fearing where it's come from. This guy before was abundant, and this might be us wondering if we're going to have clothes or toilet paper or something in the future.
It's almost speaking to the opposite end of things,
yeah.
isn't it, right?